Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah. I'm with the Midwest Writing Center, and I am excited today to talk about in-universe sequels with Rachel Corsini and Misty Urban, two authors that you have seen here before and who I really like both as people and as writers. It's always such a delight when you read a friend's work and they're like incredibly talented in addition to being, smart and fun and wonderful people. I'm going to go ahead and read their bios. I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to disappear and they're going to take it away and run the show in alphabetical order. Um, Rachel Corsini. After declaring herself a pretty pink princess during her first ballet class, Rachel dreamt of sugar plums and began pirouetting her way through life. While studying to become a ballerina, she compulsively read books under her covers by flashlight and scribbled in spiral-bound notebooks. The urge to tell stories culminated in her graduation from Columbia College, Chicago, with a BFA in fiction writing. Never one to keep her feet on the ground, she traveled the world from Prague to Cape Town. Once settled back in Queens, she dabbled in journalism before working as an editorial assistant for a medical publisher. Seeking a more fulfilling career, she earned her MAT from Queens College and currently works as an English teacher in an alternative program in New York City. Rachel spends her time sipping coffee, trying to cook, and caring for her stuffies. She currently resides in Freeport, Long Island. Is that true? Are you in Freeport, Long Island?
I am. Yes, I had migrated my way out of Queens.
And then Misty Urban. Misty is a fiction writer, medievalist, essayist, editor, and writing teacher. Her award-winning collections of short stories and assorted medieval scholarship explore the adventures of monstrous and misbehaving women, while her creative nonfiction explores the adventures of motherhood. In her historical fiction and romances, she likes to reward her ambitious, rule-breaking heroines with handsome heroes and happy futures. She holds an MFA in fiction and a PhD in medieval literature and lives in eastern Iowa with a handsome park ranger. Okay, I did not somehow know that your husband was a park ranger. Two small budding scholars, and a rather heavy collection of books. Her newest book out currently is The Forger and the Duke, which I read a description of recently and was very excited about, but I can't remember more than crayons. And then she's got a new book coming out on May 7th called The Painter Takes an Earl. Thank you both for being here with me today. Last time we were here, we talked about rebellious women and
Yes.
um, their romances. And today we're going to talk about in-universe sequels. So we're operating for me because I know that we're not talking about direct sequels, but sequels that live or new books that live in the same universe as other books that have been previously written. So the first question, this is for both of you, will be how'd you decide to stay in the universe?
Oh, that's a
Rachel, I want to hear about your universe. Tell us about the setup you've got.
good. So, like, staying within the universe for me was kind of like not necessarily like a no-brainer, but it was almost like because I didn't want to let Daniela and Vincent go from Sushi and Sea Lions, but it's also writing a sequel or a romance with a happily ever after is really difficult. Um, so because you still need to follow the romance beats, so that would mean that I would have to put Daniela and Vincent through another series of trials and have that
Mhm.
separation and then have them come back together and I didn't really want to anger people and I kind of didn't want to break the magic. So when I was looking at the universe itself, I was like, "Oh, Trisha, her best friend is like single and unattached and then she kind of has like this moment in at the end of Sushi and Sea Lions where she bumps into her old college flame and I was like this is perfect because Trisha blows it off. What happens in Greece stays in Greece. You know, they've all had a lot of drinks and
Yeah.
she's like whatever and I was like this is perfect, like this could be its own story and Trisha could be her own story and that
Yeah.
means I can also tuck in some of Daniela and Vincent's life, right? Because they would not disappear because Trisha's her best friend, so that was kind of like the no-brainer for me. um so I was like, oh, this is great. And then of course that started the conversation of, well, do Daniela's friends all get their own book? So
Right.
like there, you know, I have notes on, because Daniela has two best friends. She has Trisha and Melly, and I have notes on a book for Melly also. Who's
Yay.
got the younger guy who's that would be, I guess, like age gap. So
Hmm.
she's like got the younger guy in Sushi and Sea Lions. So Melly is also going to have her own book. But weirdly enough, I also have a draft of a book that takes place not in the same locale as Sushi and Sea Lions, but close enough. And there is an Easter egg of Daniela and Vincent in that book. So all of my books are, in a way, universally interconnected, because it is possible for all of these characters, maybe without even knowing it, to run into each other.
They live in the same world. Yeah.
They live in the same world, um that I've created in New York, in New York City, in the boroughs of New York City, where it is believable. um so like one of those things for me was, this is the modern world in New York City, and you would have, believe it or not, pockets of friends that coexist almost like beside you. So I wanted it to feel like you could be out at that bar that Daniela and Vincent hang out in,
Hmm.
and with your own friends and your own world and your own things happening, but they could also be there in their own world and their own universe, and it's like happening at the same time. So that was kind of like the thing that I wanted to create for people, right? Like, this is the same thing that's happening it's happening in our world, in our present moment, but it's their
Hmm.
world in
Hmm.
ours. So
I
that's
love
that.
that idea.
Yeah.
I've approached the, so you can give me some feedback here since you have
Yeah.
this experience. So I have two different sequel formats or structures going on. So for my contemporaries, it starts with this book, and this was completely a one-off. My Day as Regan Forrester. It's the body swap. I mentioned it in our last time
Yes.
together. So the Midwest mom gets swapped into the body of this Hollywood starlet whose life is a shambles. And then at the end, everything goes back, and there is a romance. There's a flirty romance that the Midwest mom has with the Hollywood director who, um, of course, doesn't realize that he's not dealing with his actress. And so there's kind of a little bit of a spark there. And then at the end of it, that was simply going to be a one-off. I didn't imagine going anywhere with it until my very best friend said, "Well, what about that director? What happens to him?" So I thought, well, yeah, let's follow his story. So the my thing with Timothy K then is a sequel in the sense that he goes off and he meets his own woman and has his own romance. And it was just going to follow after, like the events would follow after, and maybe there'd be some references.
Right.
But then this is something we should talk about. So Regan Forrester shows up in this book. She just waltzes on a stage and knocks on the door and creates all of this tension and drama because that's what you need in a romance. You know, she's a threat to the other heroine. So that was really fun to write. And then after I was done, I had a romance with Reagan kind of going in the back of my thing with Timothy K. And I broke them up at the end, thinking maybe I'll go back to this, maybe I'll go back to this. And I let the idea cook a bit. But then a few months ago, I just finished a draft for Reagan's story, which follows the events. So this is I think kind of like what you're doing. They live in the same world, and the events of the next book follow after the first. And you see references back, like especially in Reagan's book, she's friends now with Beth, who's the heroine from the body swap. So it all comes back and it all gets together. And it was just so much fun. But the continuity thing, like, how do you how do you make the new books fit with the old? Like you're discovering new things about the character? How does that work for you?
So I don't, yes. So the continuity thing. So there is a little overlap between the end of Sushi and Sea Lions and the beginning of this next book,
Okay.
because the beginning of the next book starts when they're in Greece. So there is some overlap going on there.
Hmm.
So it literally is, like you said, it's an overlap and then it continues on. So, and like you said, I am learning things about these characters now, especially because I'm writing from Trisha's point of view. Um, so I think Trisha was like a fully fleshed out character before, but now she is the star of the show. So it needs to be even more,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, I think it does align just because she was only Daniela's best friend. And she, not only, but she was not the main focus. And I was not running like multiple romances in that story at one time, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
didn't really get Daniela and Trisha. Yes, they did have one on one time with each other. So I think those aspects of Trisha's personality came through. But now, because she's running things, it is very much like, me learning about more deeply about who she is and Trisha's wounds and all of those things. And I think it just naturally, I think it just naturally comes to the forefront. Sometimes my worry is the continuity between like, is this all like believable, like within the timeline? Like, would these things
Hmm.
happen? Like, is it is it too fast? Is it too slow? Especially because I did that thing with the overlap. Like, are people gonna get that? Are they gonna understand that that's what happened? Like, the first part of this book takes place during the end of the first book, technically. So like that that was difficult. And also thinking about like what's this is the one. What stuff did I mention in the first book
Yes.
that I need to mention again in this book?
Hmm.
Or did I forget it and not write it correctly? So now I have to go back.
Yes.
And like one of the things that Trisha says in Sushi, and like one of the girls, like or whatever, says in Sushi and Sea Lions is like, oh, Nikos was like a 2 week thing or whatever, yada yada yada. But he wasn't, right? So now I don't know if that was like a little white lie that Trisha told her friend,
Uh-huh.
um, to not be embarrassed about the situation that she kind of found herself in because Nico in college was a raging, I mean, he loved her a lot and like that's very clear and like that comes through in this second book. But he was a raging disaster. Uh
Hmm.
he was your
Can't
he was
wait.
he was your typical, you know, New York party boy, a lot of alcohol, a lot of late nights, stuff like that. And I know he started to realize like he had a problem with alcoholism and things like that, very wounded, you know, and then he ghosted her. And
Hmm.
so she was embarrassed. And because she was also like madly in love with him, even though he had all of these issues, right? So so yeah, I think it was a lie that she told her friends, oh, we were only together for like this short amount of time. And like, yeah, you hung out with him. It's like the tail end of,
Yeah.
whatever. But they all remember him because they all remember him as Naked Nick, which is also embarrassing,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
he is well known for streaking down Third Avenue after a drunken bender. So
And how do you come back from that? That's the thing that I have found in my contemporary romances, especially when I had this character and some of the characters there to create conflict and sort of, Regan was designed to be the antagonist in the first one. And she turned out to be really, I really liked her. I really liked her wounds. I really liked her vulnerability. I wanted to kind of give her a bit of an arc of self-realization.
yes,
But then that continues into the second one, and I'd set her up to be really kind of flighty and selfish and in this kind of charming and endearing way. But she's supposed to be the exact opposite of my heroine. And then in her third book, when she's the heroine, I had that same question, like, how do I turn this into an arc where it makes sense that she would have been self-absorbed and selfish and kind of fluffy brained for a while. Like, and I have to find out her motivations for that. Was she acting? Was it a ruse? Has she grown in this time? I really love it when those antagonists kind of grow and change. I think that's
yes,
the thing I like most.
yes. And like, I mean, because now we're into like character and stuff and how they like grow or change like throughout multiple books, or like how certain
Mhm.
things like set things off or change relationships and friendships. And those are also really important. Like one of the major things that, you looking at the motivations of characters and why they do the things that they do, one of the things that's going on with Trisha in Sushi and Sea Lions is that she has like this thing where like guys will ghost her, but then she'll like go back to them, like I don't know if you remember, like there's the birthday party and George is around again and everyone's like, wait, I thought George was
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. Why
That
is George here?
that is a recurring theme because George is also in the beginning and around in the work in progress too, because
Hmm.
this is Trisha's like MO. She doesn't like let them go, or she will let them come back. And she starts to realize this, and she like makes some comments about like second chances don't go well. I'm not good at a second chance.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So she's like, have I learned my lesson? And so she doesn't want anything to do with Nick because the last time she does like a rebound or a second chance, it goes very, very badly
Yeah.
because George is an awful human being. And so it goes very, very badly. And so she's kind of like, I'm going to let Nick come in and like blow up my life. I don't think so, but he's very, very persistent. Um, and he does something very heroic for her, which is, you know, you just
Well,
like,
you
what?
you have to have that for the romance. So have you found as you're progressing, have you needed ever to change the world? I mean, I've added pieces for the new characters to kind of inhabit their own space, but
Yeah.
how have you approached that?
Yeah. It is a little different because Trisha inhabits a different sphere.
Hmm.
She is very, very wealthy. And so there are places that have like broadened the world, but she's still in like the little like, Queens, like Sushi and Sea Lions world, because that's like where they all like grew up together and stuff like that. Like she hasn't left that behind, but she also has her separate world, which is, in the financial district in Manhattan, very fancy restaurants. Um, she lives like in a much fancier place. She at one actually like at one point they go out to one of her clients' homes in the Hamptons, which
Hmm.
is this beautiful, like contemporary cottage with like a private beach, multi millions of dollars. Like,
Nice.
yeah. So
Nice.
you also get to see that sphere as well, but that's
Uh-huh.
like the way wide world. But
Hmm.
the smaller world is still that like little like bubble of the local guys, of her best friends, of the crappy bars, like
Yes.
because Nick is like a down home guy. So you know I'm like, I kind of love that because we talked a little bit about this last time too. I flipped the script. She's the millionaire. Sushi and Sea Lions is available at Walmart. I actually did know that.
That's awesome.
I know. I was very excited when I saw that. Not Target. Whatever. I've been over it. They don't need to be at
Viewers,
Target.
go out right after this and buy your copy of Sushi and Sea Lions.
I was going to post the link to purchase in the comments.
Yeah,
Please
I've
do.
got
Oh,
mine right
there it is.
here. There it
My book
is.
is my book is off to the side somewhere. Like I think it's not like in reaching distance. I should have held up. Yeah. But yeah, so like her world is a little bit bigger. Daniela's became narrower. Like Daniela did kind of have that world, but more like, the Upper West Side, Manhattan, highbrow, like art scene, because she was a ballerina. So
Right.
that is very different. Like she would have been going to not like finance events or like, things like that. She would have been attending stuff that was, you know, like gala events and like cocktail parties with like celebrities and things like that, and donors for the ballet, and even the opera, because she danced at the Metropolitan Opera House. And very, or even, like art gallery openings, depending on like, stuff like that that she was invited to. So that even also was a very different world, which I did not get into because she had already been pulled out of
Right.
that.
Right.
You see it a little bit in Sushi when it's like the closing of the season, that moment, right? Like she's all gets all dressed up and she goes to the event, and you know that kind of thing. But yeah, so even then there's like the main little world, and then it's also like each of the characters has their own kind of spheres, right?
Mhm.
But Sushi was like the start of the world. Like even Melly is gonna have her own tiny little like sphere, because she also lives, like Melly lives on Long Island, like in a mother-daughter house with her parents. So it's a little different, right?
Mhm.
So again, you're gonna get like even though like Queens was like the start of her life, but like you're gonna get like the hanging out there with her friends, and then you're gonna get the that like also different side of it. I have a question for you though. How do you
Yeah.
how do you tackle like changing and dynamics of like friendships and relationships within the world so it's believable?
It's funny because that's one of the things that the new book has to develop is the old relationships that were hinted at. Like I ran into this with Reagan's story a little bit. There was something in the first book in the body swap that wasn't resolved, and I completely missed it. But a friend of mine, a friend and fellow reader, found it, and she said, "How come that little piece wasn't tied up?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I have to deal with that." So I thought on that a little bit, and I hope this was answering your question. So it became actually a big piece of conflict and a turning point in the next book, the one I'm trying to convince my publisher to take and publish now in Reagan's story, that came up as something unresolved that she had to go back and fix. So I'm hoping that if at any point readers do kind of follow through the whole series, that they'll say, "Oh, that's how they dealt with that." So I guess the thing is try to use it, turn it into conflict, and then use it, as you said, to move that character along their growth. But trying to make that growth consistent and believable with other things that have gone on. That's fun. I
Yes.
think that's one of the challenges, but it's also the fun of writing
Yes.
that same world.
I believe I you're gonna get like a little Easter egg. I've dealt with that in the same way. I had a lot of like, my readers, and even like, my friends who read Sushi before it was like even like published. One of my friends was like, but they get back together, but he never really gives her an answer. Right? I mean, it's a romance. It's a happily ever after. They get back together, guys. Like, let's
Spoiler alert.
spoiler alert. But one of the things was, he doesn't give her an answer about the things that she wants, right?
Hmm.
Daniela, for all of her being, as I was like, la di da as she is, or as like fun as she is and spontaneous, she wants things that, I would say like lean a little bit more traditional, right? Like she realized like she wants a family and she wants to get married and whatever. And then that
Yeah,
was one of their polarizing things, was because she found out that he didn't want to do that again. He'd done it already and it
right.
didn't work. So he didn't know if that was something that he wanted to do. So, one of my friends like said to me, just as a friend said to you, so they got back together, but you never answered that question.
Yeah, that little piece that isn't resolved. Next book.
Right. And again, so that does carry over into the next book,
Hmm.
right? Because in my opinion, some of the events, like I said, of Sushi and Sea Lions happen in the background of whatever's happening with Trisha's story. And so you get like some of the pieces of what's happened with Daniela and Vincent in Sushi and Sea Lions.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, it's tackled in a very Daniela and Vincent kind of way. They don't, Daniela doesn't really think through. It just sort of happens. But I'll give you like a small Easter egg, for instance. Vincent finally he contacts Trisha and he's like, I need you to like do something with me. Like, are you free or whatever? And she's like, all right, well, this is a little weird, but sure, whatever.
Hmm.
And basically he's going to buy the ring and he wants her to come. And they actually have an argument about this because yes, because she asked him, are you getting
I love
married?
that.
Yes. Are you getting married because this is what Daniela wants and you don't want to lose her? Or like, why are you getting married?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it goes back and it comes full circle because it tackles that question. So why is he getting married to her?
Hmm.
And so it does like resolve that, but in a very Trisha bubble.
That lets
And
her develop.
yes,
Yeah.
and it also lets her develop because Trisha is a love skeptic at this point also, and she's kind of like, well, what's the point? Like, what is the whole point?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She's like angry. And then she hears the way Vincent, who you could also give that title a little bit to, speaks about the reason why he decides to get engaged to Danielle.
Hmm.
And so, and that's growth for him, right? And growth for her at the same time. And it also resolves an issue, right?
That's what you need. Yeah, this
Right.
is what I found too. So especially when you're in the second or third book, the earlier ones, you want to show that relationship progressing. Like in the second book in My Thing with Timothy K, when they're talking about, the Midwest mom who's now off in Minnesota, like I had to think, well, what's happening to her now? She's back in her life, but
Yeah.
something had to change about her. Like that was the whole point of My Day as Regan Forrester. She has this character arc. So where does she go after? But you also have to, I'm sure you found this too, make sure that, like in your second book, Danielle and Vince aren't coming in trying to steal the show. I've seen this happen in some series. The writer can't let go of that couple and they keep stealing scenes. But I really think that in like the next book in a series, it needs to be they're supporting characters now and they can be having their own arc, but it needs to parallel and push and contrast and conflict with the mains. I don't know. What do you
Yes.
think?
I agree. It does need to be a conflicting arc, right? Like, and it was important to me that Daniela and Vincent's stuff, it's very clear that it is resolved in this book.
That's good. Yes, that
Trisha
they're
is
developing still.
Trisha is the one, like with her stuff, that's not resolved. And it
Hmm.
also gives the answer to my readers of Sushi and Sea Lions. Does Daniela get what she wants?
Hmm.
Right? Or is there a different compromise there? Right? What did they come to an agreement on?
Yes.
Um, in order to be together? Like what meant more to them to be together? So like and that was important. And Trisha's like watching all of this unfold. And I also there's like also another like conversation too where they're hanging out like eating a cheese board. And it's Trisha and Vin and Daniela, and she's going through like this laundry list of like why Nick is like a bad idea, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
This is her personality. She's very like makes lists, like all this kind of stuff. And Daniela is like, what is with the list? And yeah, and Vin's like,
That's
yeah.
funny.
Vin's like, we don't do lists really in this house. He's like, but I'm gonna say something. He's like, if you put me on a list, I don't look all that great, right? And he says that about himself, right? He's like,
Hmm.
like you gotta stop. He's like, if you took me and you put me on a list, I'm in dire financial straits. I'm a single father. I'm just getting divorced. Like, he's like, I'm horrible on paper.
Don't
And
put me on
so,
a list.
right. And so Danielle was like, see, stop with the list. Do you like him? Do you want to go out with him? And and it's a very funny conversation. It shows the polarity of Trisha like versus her friends, but
Hmm.
it also is like a character defining moment in a way, because it's like, if you're gonna like judge like this person based on like the laundry list of things like why you shouldn't engage in this, like then you'll like it'll never go, like you got to stop, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it also again like gives the supporting characters a chance to like help the show along. um
Yeah.
but there's also like friendship stuff going on too, which I also think is really important in stories. And I don't know how you feel about that, but like you know the girls themselves are going through like a friendship dynamic shift that's happening. So,
Hmm.
there's also that in the background, which I hope to resolve in book three. That will be coming up in book three because the girls are going through something that's like it's like consistent and running through. Well, let's get book two out first and finish book three. But there is like a very like tense thread that is running through with just the girls.
I think that's really important for interest. I
Yeah.
think that you need that in any series, especially if it's like the main character that's returning. You need to have some chronic tension or you need to have some larger arc that's going to hold them. I really think that's true. I want to hear how you handle the challenge though of what we touched on just a bit earlier. So when a supporting character, we know as writers what's going on with them, right? Like I'm going to use the example of Bernie in this world, in Reagan Forrester's world. So I invented Bernie to run the Desert Rose bed and breakfast in Artesia, and it's where Dale and Timothy K meet, and Reagan shows up and some other things happen. And I knew what was going on with Bernie. She's off stage for much of it. She comes back to resolve a major plot point. I had a feeling of what her conflict was. I had a feeling of what her personality was. And I came back to her in the third book. She enters again, but now I'm thinking there could be a fourth book and it could be Bernie's book. I'm really interested. Like she's an older, it would be a maturing heroine. She's in her 40s, she's maybe 50, she's retired. And
Yes.
so, I've set her up and I see her clearly. I have the picture, like the Bernie vision board in my head, but what is going on with her inside? Like, what would be the questions driving her, and what's the old conflict, and what's the backstory, and what's the motivation, and who would be like the right person for her? How do you go about developing those secondary characters in new ways when it's their book? Where do you find the inspiration, I guess?
I think it was just like for me, I think it was just like a very organic choice,
Hmm.
right? Like, you know, I just like had that thought. I was like, Trisha and Nick. It's like, that would be fun. I
Hmm.
was like, that would be fun. She ran into her old boyfriend in Greece.
Yes, yes.
Like, you know, eh, like, and was making out with him on the beach. I mean, like, yes,
Great premise. No, that's obviously a
you
premise.
know,
I'm so glad
right.
you're going
And
with it.
then, and then that's where it was kind of like it branched out from there, where I was like, okay, this could be kind of like the three girls, right? And their stories. And it could be kind of a trilogy of sorts where it was like you had Daniela, you get Trisha, and you get Melly. And
Hmm.
and they're yes, there's like a central love story, but also it's about them too, about the three girls, because they are always in each other's lives. So I
Hmm.
think that that was also the central like driving force there too. But like the, and I think there was also a desire to develop Trisha also. I was like, yeah,
Okay.
sure, you're making out with like your hot Greek god ex-boyfriend on the beach, but what's driving that, and what is it about you that is like looking for that? Or are you? Like,
Hmm.
or do you just not care? Like,
Hmm.
and then you get chased by this Adonis like cinnamon roll for another 80,000 words, you
How do
know?
you say no?
How do you
Seriously.
say you can't say no? And he has
No.
a golden doodle named Mac and Cheese. How do you say no to this man?
Yep.
Right?
Read this
Um,
now.
Mac Mac and cheese is the star of the show. Um,
The funny animal sidekick. I love that trope.
always they. I think I think that that's like a theme
Hmm.
in
It's your
in
signature. It will be your signature
they
move. There will
always
be an
someone has an
adorable
animal.
animal. Yeah.
Someone has an animal. Like in the notes of like the Melly's book, like 'cause that's just like notes at this point, so I don't forget things.
Hmm.
Um, he has her son has a guinea pig named Paquito,
That's awesome.
right? And he takes the guinea pig with him everywhere. So
Hmm.
like this is like the thing, like when his dad picks him up, right? He's always getting yelled at by Melly's mom because they're no longer together. And
Hmm.
she thinks that he is a jerk. And so she curses at him in Spanish. And he always says thank you and then picks up his is actually very funny. So, but Alex takes the guinea pig with him everywhere. So I do think there's going to be a scene with the guinea pig crisis.
Hmm.
Um, but
It's
there is an
inevitable, but it's gonna be wonderful. It's gonna be so much
no.
fun.
Sarah's like, no, nothing is gonna happen to the. I can't write anything really bad happening to animals.
No, you don't want to hurt the animal. It's a
No,
romance. It's
you already had a cat crisis.
even in women's fiction, like you have to have
No.
that optimistic ending.
Yes, the guinea pig will be fine. I'm sorry, I don't mean to like distress anyone.
No
And
guinea
so is
pigs
the
will be
dog,
harmed in the writing of this book.
and
So
so will the dog. And the dog is also fine. I promise.
you mentioned having Daniela and Vince in a cameo, and that made me think of
Yes,
how I had this other contemporary that I wrote, and it was a standalone at the time, but it was kind of another Hollywood one. And so when I was writing my thing with Timothy K, it's just kind of fun for me. I didn't know the publishing status of that other one. It was just kind of in limbo for a while. But just for me, I linked those two worlds. So I have my characters in my thing with Timothy K talking about an actor drama that's going on elsewhere in this book, right? And I
right.
wanted to make it so that readers, like if that book never saw the light of day, you could still read that and still get the point. But when that book comes out, and I hope it will be soon, I really want readers to have that delight. They're like, oh my gosh, this is what was happening. This is kind of like the behind the scenes. It's this world intersecting.
Yes, like so you like when you do stuff like that, you really are like even in such a small way creating your own universe within the bigger world,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes. It's
Like,
so fun.
and it's so fun. Like I was saying, like this other project that's like kind of way on the side, but I have some written down. Danny and Vin, they have a very small cameo. This book, this book takes place in Brooklyn, so it's a totally different borough. Again, Italians, very Brooklyn Italians, and they are at. I don't know if you guys know what these things are. This is a very New York thing, maybe. It's almost like a street fair, but it's called Our Lady of Mount Carmel Feast. And there's like carnival games and Italian food. And it's a big
Fun.
deal. And it's
Hmm.
out in the street. All of us Italians, we go every year. They do like
Yay.
this, they do like this very they like lift like the saint statue and they like dance in the street and they go it's a very well-known thing here that happens in Williamsburg in Brooklyn every single year. And so this scene is at the feast and the main character is at the feast and she's by the Zeppeli stand, which are basically just like these fried puff doughs like covered in powdered sugar. And Danny and Vincent are standing at the Zeppeli stand and she is eating a Zeppeli and it's like the powdered sugar gets all over her face and he laughs and then he like licks the sugar off her nose. And it's so and then there's like another part where the character is leaving and Danny and Vincent are walking down the street to get to their car and she won a turtle in like one of the games and she says Matthew's gonna love it and Vinny is like I can't believe we're putting like
Breaking of a turtle. Yeah.
she and then Danny
Uh-huh.
says I had to save it. to like, but it shows you this world is happening here, but they could all necessarily run into each other.
And that's just fun for readers. That's just a gift to
Yeah.
readers when you see that. Like,
Right.
I'm hoping that will happen. So, I need some guidance about how you keep track in your extended universe of where everybody is at one time, like kind of like the Marvel timeline. And it's not as complicated because I don't have time travel or the rest of it. But
Oh
here's
God.
the story. Advise me, please. So, my very first historical novel I wrote, which is currently unpublished, is set in 1832.
Okay.
And the heroine went to the school in Bath, and it's called Miss Gregoire's Academy for Girls. This is a big deal, okay, because I have not revealed the whole thing about Miss Gregoire's yet. But like my readers don't know, I haven't talked about it anywhere. It's you, Rachel. This is going to be a big thing. Like this is the
Oh,
beginning. When we trace it all back, it's like the beginning of Lady Whistledown. Miss Gregoire's
ugh.
is the center of my historical romance
Okay.
world. This Academy in Bath is in every book. I went back to like my next one I wrote was set in 1792, and I had a reference to Miss Gregoire's, and it
Oh,
comes out a little bit more. And then in my next one, I'm like, well, Miss Gregoire's has to feature. And it started as a running joke. Like all of my really feisty heroines have been educated at this. Um,
it started as a joke. It
it's
always does.
it started as a joke, but now it's a thing, okay?
Now it's
So
a
I
thing.
have a Western, the my characters, and this is set in like 1849, and they're going to, she's actually the daughter of an English earl, but she's traveling to San Francisco Gold Rush. And she wanted to attend Miss Gregoire's, and she's really mad because having to go find her parents in San Francisco Gold Rush times is taking her away from Miss Gregoire's. And I'm like, I have to figure out how to make this work because Miss Gregoire would be like 70 or 80 now. So it's building into this whole mythos. Like there's going to be a next Miss Gregoire, and it's just going to replace the earlier one.
You're
It's kind of
right.
like, like the king never dies, you just get a new king. And then I had this book. So,
This is, see, but this is what it's about, right? Because this
yeah.
is a link between all of your world, right?
Yes. Yes. So even like so my first historical that came out, the Vicomte Overboard, there's no mention of Miss Gregor, and I'm a little worried about it, but she's there. Okay, nobody knows this, but she is there. The Academy in Bath is there, and I've really worked hard to think, can I just for my own fun work in a reference, like so that readers know, and I didn't. I don't regret it, but I'm saying it now. It's in that world. But now for fun, I'm making references like one of my earlier romances. Um, I bring in a character who's in the unpublished novel, and I really had to comb through that manuscript and do a timeline. Like, okay, when would she have been at Miss Gregoire's, and when did she leave, and where did she go after, and when did she marry, and when did she have her children, and when did this happen and that happen? So, like, I don't know. I've heard of people making a series Bible. How do I do that? I think I
See,
might need it.
you might need it. I don't know if I'm there yet because I try to make things as simple for myself as humanly possible.
Oh,
So,
that's such good advice.
like for me, like I said, there's overlap a little bit in the beginning of Sushi and Sea Lions and the beginning of this next, like my work in progress, like what's happening with Trisha, work in progress, right? Um, the overlap stops at, so I would say like the end of September. So, that's only like 6 weeks. And then
Hmm.
it continues on from the end of Sushi, then it continues, right? So it's Trisha taking on the timeline. So
Yeah,
everything
that
after
makes
that,
sense.
everything happens after that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So whatever's happening with Danny and Vinny behind the scenes is happening after that. Same thing with Melly and whatever's up with her and Charlie is happening after that. All of Trisha's story after that. And I've also decided that Melly's book as well, it's going to be after. There may be very little overlap, but it will be
Hmm.
after
Hmm.
because there is an event that has to happen in this second book or may happen like off scene after the end of this next book, this book, But when we pick up Mellie's story, I already know where her story starts. It will be after the events of book 2.
That makes sense.
Right. And you'll
So,
see them all again.
Sarah, I like that you're keeping it simple and direct. Sarah mentioned in the comments that I should go look to the fantasy writers, and I think she's absolutely correct, especially those who have those big sprawling
Yes.
worlds and they cover a different time.
Diana,
Yeah,
Diana Gabaldon, we've talked about, I can't remember, but we've talked about that. I mean, imagine the timeline that she's keeping track of and like family
yeah,
trees and
yeah.
the backstory, right? I mean, again,
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
is, you touched on this too, like when you have these, they do have brains bigger than you can imagine. I mean, when touching on this too,
Fabulous.
right? When you're not focused on the main couple or the main protagonist or the main character that you're writing from, the lives of people in your universe are still happening.
Yes.
So you have to remember that too. And so you kind of, again, you have to, like Sarah, the backstory, you have to give them a backstory and you have to also give them a timeline. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's on the page, but there's stuff happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like Mellie in this second book is planning a wedding. There went to a bridal shower. One of like a pivotal scene that happens in this book is they go away for her bachelorette party to Aruba.
Nice.
There's a part where they're on a boat. This is also a theme in my writing. I feel like the girls go on vacation and something happens.
That's a good
So,
theme.
you know, so there is also like Mellie has like stuff happening in
Mm-hmm.
the underside,
Mm-hmm.
Daniela and Vincent as a couple have stuff happening. It's, but it's not all on the page. And I think that that's like that, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your readers aren't going to know all of it. You just kind of like, you can throw things in there that there's stuff happening in the periphery. And then if you choose to address it in the next book, that's fine. You can, unless it's
Yeah.
not really that important, right?
I'm waiting to see how that flies with my new book that's coming out because it's set in London in the same year as the events of The Forger and the Duke. And because I told you everything is connected by Miss Gregoire, it turns out that the girls went to the same school and knew each other at school. So the heroines aren't interacting in this, but it started as kind of a throwaway where the heroine, Harriet, who's the heroine of the Painter book, they're gossiping about the end of The Forger and the Duke. And for those who haven't read it, I guess it's not a big spoiler alert because it's a romance. You pick up the forger, you know that she's going to get her Duke eventually. So
Right.
they're discussing it. And Harriet's like, oh, I should go talk to her. Like, that would be fun. And then there's mention of the antagonist in that book, the Duchess of Hunsdon, who started this court case. And in The Forger and the Duke, it's a big deal and you hear all about it. But that conflict kind of just is on the fringes, like you said, the periphery of what's happening in Painter Takes an Arrow. But I couldn't ignore it because they're in London at the same time. It would have been in the gossip. So I wanted
Yes.
to acknowledge it. I wanted to make that connection. I'm really interested to see what readers think of it, though.
Yeah.
I hope
Because,
they love it.
well, again, because we're talking about like creating your own universe.
Hmm.
If it wasn't, if you were like ignoring the fact that like this could potentially be its own universe, then no, you don't have to address it. But you have like Miss Gregoire, you have like the same social circle, you have all of this going on. So yeah,
Yes.
they're gonna be gossiping about this,
You have
right?
those intersections. I'm just interested to see if I can pull it off. I'm interested to see how it lands.
Yeah,
I want to ask you one more question
yeah,
before we wrap up here.
yeah,
So we talked about the challenges of
yes.
writing
Oh,
series,
yes,
connected books. We've talked about the fun of it.
yeah.
And so what do you think is the payoff? What is the payoff for you as a reader? Do you like reading series and why?
I actually do. Um, Especially like if I become obsessed with the world, with the characters, with like the setting, with anything else, because you get to like really escape into something and really, you know, I guess like immerse yourself in it more, right? Like,
Yes.
but yeah, I do believe that there is a that standalone books like on their own are valuable, and like, there's a reason why it is that own book and there shouldn't be any more, right? But the the idea that, like, these characters, like I said in the beginning, could live alongside of you in this place is
Hmm.
like exciting, and it's like, it's like comforting, right? Like, because that's how my books are written, where it's like I said, you could be standing at the bar and Daniela and Vincent in their world could be standing next to you. And
Hmm.
like, so that was like a big draw for me. And so it's like, if that's the case, then they could be a part of like my universe that I'm creating. And I think it is comforting to readers. You get to know characters and you fall in love with them, and you like, you want them to be okay, and you want to see how their lives go, and you want to
Yeah.
check in on them. And I think a series like that helps you check in on them, but also fall in love with new characters too, which is also important. You want to do that.
Right. Well, you're
Yeah.
getting to know, this is a good connection to what Sarah said about fantasy too. You're getting to know the world more as well.
Yes.
So as a reader, I love that familiarity and that comfort, like Bridgerton. You know the earlier sibling is married and the earlier sibling. So what's going to happen to the next? Like, let's read their love story. So you get that peek at what they're doing, and you get to see them evolve. It's
Yes.
just, yeah, it's for me, it's the comfort and the familiarity. Like, I know I'm going to like it. So it's just an easier bet than maybe trying
Yeah.
something new with an unknown author. So,
Yes. And that's the other thing too. It's kind of like a blanket, right? Like, you want to like wrap yourself in the cozy blanket. You're not going to buy something that's
yeah.
tacky,
I
you know,
know. You
but
know you're gonna love it, right?
you're gonna love it. So, but like, this also goes into like, the whole thing of like the the publishing industry too, and why it is so difficult to like really break in and to like do well as a debut or like something like that, because it is, readers get used to their characters, they get used to their writers and their stories, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
a blanket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was almost like a no-brainer to try and do this, because if I'm fortunate enough to have fans or like people that really love my writing, it'll be easier for them also to return. So I'm not going to say it was entirely a marketing strategy, but you know, I did want to visit Trisha's story. Don't get me wrong, like that, I was drawn to that. But in a way, it is also a valuable marketing and publishing strategy to be like,
Yes.
these characters are a part of this world, and you can dive back into it.
That is especially true of historical romance. If you
Yeah.
pitch an idea almost anywhere, the publisher will say, "Is it a series?"
Right. Well, historicals, oh yeah. Like, that's like a
Particularly.
big, yeah,
Hmm.
that's like a big thing. Contemporaries, maybe not so much, because, the standalone universe. But yeah, and I think it's valuable. I think it's valuable to also acknowledge that. But as a reader, it's just the comfort level of
Hmm.
like, I'm gonna see my favorite characters. I know the world, I know the writing, and like, I want to enjoy that.
I lied. I have one more encore question.
Okay.
When is it enough? When should a series be over?
Oh, ooh, that's a hard
Is
question.
there an end? Can it go on infinitely? Just sort of replicating like a mirror?
Misty took over as host. Absolutely. Um, believe it or not, I have ideas for within the sushi realm.
Hmm.
For the three girls, right, would have Daniela, Melly, and Trisha having their own books. I mean, if I wasn't such a slow writer, this would be happening faster, but whatever. So Daniela, Trisha, and Melly have their own books.
Hmm.
Um, Spoiler alert. Then there might be, like, in my world, a jump, a, a large jump, where um Matthew and one of Daniela's ballet students may have a book.
Oh, the kids get their romances. I love that. Joanna
The
Lindsay did that
kids,
all the time.
the kids, and they've already
Eloisa
met.
James does it. Yeah.
They've already met. It's the girl that he partnered with in ballet class
I
that he
think
got.
that might
And
be, yeah.
you went, huh?
No, I just realized that I think that is part of why I am drawn to series. Like even with my very first historical, it was never going to be a one-off. I had in my head while I was writing romances for all of the sisters. There's 6 girls. The
Right.
one of the publishers who looked at it, she's like, "Are you trying to outdo Pride and Prejudice?" And I'm like, I couldn't kill any of them. It's a big world and it had romances developing for each of them. And I
Yes.
really want to go back to that. I think as a writer, maybe there's that pull of familiarity as well. Like I already have the kernel of that character, and I just want to sort of,
You want to break it open. You want it
yeah,
to like
want to
become popcorn. Like you
write.
want to
I want to
write,
make popcorn. Yes,
right?
lots of it.
So like, you know, like I said, like I have this, right? So now there would be like a time jump because obviously these two characters would be in their 20s. They're not going to be 8 and 10 years old.
Great.
Right. Right.
Because that would be weird as a romance. That just it's awkward. Yeah,
Right. And then I
for
also
me.
have an idea for, you know, an actual Daniela and Vincent sequel, but much like they would be much older. Like they would have been together and married for a long time, like over 10 years.
So I think the answer to my question, when is the
It
series
could be
over? It's not
never.
over until it's over. Like
It's not over until
until
it's
the writer is bored or the reader is done with the
or
world.
the
But
story. There's no more.
there's no more story,
Or there's no
right?
more story, right?
All the
There's
conflict is resolved. That's a good
yes,
point. Yeah.
or there's no more story. All the conflict is resolved, or there's nothing new, or the characters are in stasis. There is something, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's like nothing else like brewing, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that's fair. So like, I mean, like I just talked about like one, two, three, four, five books. If I
That'll keep
don't
you
die,
busy for a while.
yeah, I mean, if I don't die first, that would be great. I am the George R. R. Martin of romance. Sarah, you're gonna be fine.
Yes,
Don't worry.
you
I'm
do
the
an
George
awesome
R. R. Martin of
Sarah.
romance. She's
You
gonna
know,
die first.
don't. We need those books. We
Uh,
need those books.
uh,
I feel like maybe it's time we should turn things back to Sarah. I have
yeah,
kind of taken over. I have so many questions.
so many,
You're so
so many.
interesting.
No, I mean that's a real offer. If you want to, if you want to interview folks,
I
my time, my schedule is so packed, and this is like my favorite thing to do. If someone else were doing it, then I could just watch.
She
you
loved it. Sarah was
are,
like in there, like,
I know
yeah.
I'm having a great time. Um, this was awesome. I wish, well, Rachel, I wish you were closer because it would be very
yeah,
easy to hang out because
yeah,
Yes, I wish you were
Misty's
closer
close.
I
to
know.
come to the Midwest for a while, Rachel. It's not
Well,
Aruba, but
it is in Aruba. It's not, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be, I'm not even gonna be anywhere near the Midwest this summer. I'm sorry.
we'll come
Wow,
to New
that
York
was a
then.
tease of
Fine.
Yeah.
a sentence.
No, I'm actually visiting my parents down in Florida and I'm going to Tennessee. I'm going to Memphis for work actually and being sent there. I'm being
Research.
sent.
It's all research for stories.
All research for stories, absolutely. But
Mhm.
yeah. And then I might actually be going to Greece in August, so that should be interesting.
Hey.
Maybe my own Nick is waiting for me on a beach.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And then we want to
okay,
hear
I'll
about
take
that romance too.
the beach. Uh, well, thank you guys. I think that we had like a list of things last time that we were like, we can talk about these. So I hope that you're open to it. I just want to give you a talk show, but I can't pay anything near what you're worth. So can't pay anything. This is just my fantasy. Um, so thank you so much for doing this today. I think this was like a salve for my heart to know that my favorite,
Oh,
like I know that my favorite characters live on, but like usually it's in my head.
no,
Uh,
they do. They live on.
Ooh, they do.
They
it's like really,
persevere.
They're still
really
out
heartening.
there.
I'm gonna give some MWC updates. There's not a ton as summer is fast approaching. Um, but let's see. I think it's already next Wednesday is May 1st. We're doing our third and final question mark panel on publishing. It may not be the final. Cross your fingers. This will be on traditional publishing. That'll be at the Davenport Public Library Fairmont branch. We're also, for folks who go to Eastern Iowa Community College, we're going to do a little pop-up with the Creative Writing Club at Scott Community College. It'll be, I'm really excited about that one. It'll be a couple of different exercises. You can pop in and out as you need. It'll be in their new art gallery. And then what else do we have going on? A lot of my calendar is personal deadlines.
Registration is open for the David R. Collins conference, I
Yeah.
hope.
And hopefully you have seen that we have a really incredible, I mean, we always have
Amazing
a really
faculty.
incredible faculty, but like the fact that I get to be excited about it every year is kind of a big deal. I read a lot. So we've got Darius Stewart for the lyric memoir.
Mm.
Um, We've got Sarah Lupita Olivares, who was featured in our National Poetry Month celebration earlier this month. So you can go to our YouTube channel. That is ongoing, by the way. One fresh new poem by a fresh new poet who's friends with the Writing Center every day of April for National Poetry Month. Obviously, Sarah Lupita Olivares will be teaching poetry. If that was unclear, then I can't really help. You'll have Rebecca McCanna teaching the novel and Chad Simpson in short stories. They're all really incredible. I don't have their books next to me, but I own all their books. So that's also exciting. That'll be June 27th through 29th. We'll also have a really exciting keynote event with them in which we will reintroduce our community conversation topics, why writing matters. If you were there last year or if you weren't, it was really, really incredible, really enriching conversation, really energizing for those of us who are there. And then, of course, we have a faculty reading and participant open mic. That'll also happen during and for the conference. So you have to be a participant to participate in that open mic. I feel like May 11th is the day. Yes, May 11th, we'll have Mario Duarte here. He just wrote a book called My Father Called Us Monkeys. It's supposed to be really, really phenomenal. A friend of MWC, Chuy Renteria, wrote the forward to it. I haven't yet read it. I'm gonna try and get that done before May 11th so that I can ask good questions. That'll be at noon in the community room at the Rock Island Public Library. Mario is a really, really incredible fellow, and he's on Ice Cube Press, which is a place where a lot of our friends are published. So you know, we gotta love that press.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing good work there. And then May 22nd at Davenport Public Library Eastern Branch, Shishwen Collins has an author event. She wrote the book Flowing Water, Falling Flowers. It's a really incredible novel, which actually I think Misty either chose or edited for MWC Press. So
I did some work with that book. It's beautiful.
it's a really incredible novel. I feel like we're gonna be putting that on our list for the rest of our lives, being like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know Shishwen Collins? Because I know Shishwen Collins.
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna have our annual meeting May 28th at 4 p.m. at the Rock Island Public Library, which is exciting. There'll be a little open mic there, and there'll be some prizes such as free tuition to the Collins Writers Conference. That's an open public event, and I know that meetings don't really sound exciting, but we always make sure that there's some reason to be there. The Great River Writers Retreat is accepting applications through May 1st. That is for that is a fully funded residency for one writer from the Midwest. To spend a week at the Bennett Retreat House in Rock Island. We also offer a headlining reading space in our reading series to that winner. And then also the Young Emerging Writers Internship is accepting applications through May 13th. That is for writers age 15 to 19 in the area. And we are accepting not applications. We'll be having a Young Emerging Writers camp this summer as well for middle school age students. There's some flexibility there, 11 to 14-ish. Full information for all of that stuff's on our website. I am going to cough if I don't drink something. Give me just one moment, please.
There's so much great stuff going on.
Yeah, it's
Thank
like
you.
you were like, oh, there's not so much stuff. And then it was like,
I know, and then I talk so fast.
Unfolds.
Um, Thank you again, Misty and Rachel and everyone who's been hanging out
Oh,
with us.
sure.
And please, as always, write more light into your life.